So politics around the world is more divisive than ever. What does belonging mean in a society that's often divided and in need of transformation as we rebuild post-pandemic, post-societal pandemic, I call it? There's a health pandemic, there's a societal equity sort of pandemic. And so how do we move forward when the headwinds sometimes feel very, very strong? So that means whether at a regional level, whether it means from a gender space level, whether it means from, again, a larger sort of geopolitical space. We can keep this question as open, as close as it feels, as it resonates for you, panelists. So again, politics around the world is more divisive than ever. What does belonging mean in a society that's often divided and in need of transformation as we rebuild? Open floor.
I have some comments on here. Just again, situating myself. So rebuilding post-pandemic in a system that continuously divides our people. I think us as First Nations, we're resilient, we're adaptive. We find our ways to kind of move forward and navigate with these system barriers, like with these stories, and they kept our families away, not to mention putting you in this different box. Like, did you get the shot or did you not? These are true examples of dividing and controlling the current population. There were so many social limitations put in place during the pandemic, which caused a lot of health issues, not to mention addictions and many, many more. How are our people recovering? I'll use my nation as an example, the Squamish Nation, and how we're rebuilding post-pandemic by we're allowed to gather again in person. We're allowed to get together to plan for our future, for our own success. We get together by celebrating, by singing our traditional songs, our winter dances. We're allowed to feast again. That's a big, huge a part of who we are and how and where we come from. We're allowed to get together again and support one another in mourning, talking about that grief. That was tough, having to go through that during the pandemic and not have your community to come stand up and support you. And again, here with at New Relationship Trust, post-pandemic, we still have that flexibility to work from home 3 days during the week and come into the office 2 days. And to me, that's important to offer work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And, and again, like, we're allowed to travel to other communities to listen to their stories. And, this allows New Relationship Trust to provide that resource so they can build up their nationhood initiatives, whatever projects that they're working on. And we get to meet face to face and to, continuously build those relationships.
Thank you, Lisa. Those are wonderful insights. Thank you. I think those really all resonate, and thank you for really sharing those perspectives of, yet again, policies, structures that, again, do not take into perspectives or sideline, I should say, not even do not take sideline Indigenous communities. And it's become so ingrained and entrenched in our systems that it takes a complete flipping of an upside down perspective to see it. And that is the insidious nature of colonial structures. It's ingrained as our way to be, and we do not see it because we've become impervious to these biases that have been entrenched us. So it's incredible that it's actually pervasive everywhere, whether it's our healthcare systems, whether it's our education systems, our again, rolling out of policies and government decision making. So again, I preface that with democratic governments that are supposed to be representative of all people that they serve. So thank you for sharing that perspective.
Maybe I can jump in, and I appreciate everything that's been said. This is a topic that I care very deeply about, and in my work previously I did some work around just like how to build greater awareness and support for civility in public discourse, right? Like we can't dialogue anymore without fighting, and that doesn't produce social cohesion and supports, right? And the fighting and the vitriol that we see from elected officials and leaders across Canada and beyond has emboldened a group of people, or I guess emboldened a set of ideas to become normal, and racism is at the forefront of those ideas, right? And like that's scary. That's a scary time. So I think this past couple of years has brought to light so many of the cracks in our systems, or that already are experienced by so many people, but they've almost gone mainstream to a point where action has been forced, and now it's out there and it's public. And I think social movements and civil unrest has been a catalyst for that. And so it's a good reminder that when our societies become so divided, that being in the streets and marching is a good way to go sometimes, right? And even for folks that might not have always identified as that being their course of action to make change, right? So I think that's something I've learned, even just from the Women's March, which now feels like an eternity ago, but it really wasn't that long ago, right? And just what that represented and what we've seen since then. So this is something that I'm grappling with, what do we do about this? Like, how do we get people in government to run for office, to be part of our, democratic system, which is rooted in a colonial structure, and I acknowledge that. But how do we create space for that? And one way is to, like women and people of color. What we've seen in this province in the last few months has been appalling in terms of welcoming voices and diversity of thoughts and experiences and ideas. So I think if women are going to come forward and speak and run, then we need to create a welcoming environment for them to do so, right? And so sexism and racism and misogyny need to be named and just rejected at every front. And I think we are seeing more of that, which gives me hope. But I do worry about it. So I would be remiss if I said that, as an organization that serves youth, they are the ones that are out there leading so many of these initiatives, right? And so learning from young people and leveraging and lifting their voices. And so one thing that I'm really committed to doing is asking them what they think about the programs that we offer at Big Sisters, and are they relevant? What would they like to see? What kind of issues would they like to cover and address? And then accessing resources and funding and building a framework through staff and youth engagement that supports that kind of programming, right? So an example for us is always, we run a great program in schools that looks at healthy bodies and healthy minds, and it's really about empowering young women to see their full potential through a group mentorship model. But they're asking about Black Lives Matter. They're asking about the role, the gender binary. They're asking about all these things, and we need to be prepared. So I think there's so much opportunity to do this. And one silver lining that I see, just as someone running a community-based organization, is funders are actually creating ways for us to do this work, right? So applying for funding that looks at how to build capacity around justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in our organization. Like that's something we're working on in real time. So I think there's great inroads, but it's those kinds of examples that we need to highlight and celebrate and advocate for if we're really going to make any kind of change that we need to see in this area.
Amazing. Thank you, Chantal. Those are fantastic insights, and again, completely resonate with you. So thank you.
And if I can just add to that, and that's probably why everything that was just shared is why, and I hope this isn't controversial, but so be it. I've never really put a lot of stock in governments and politicians to be that sea change that we need. I put more stock in a lot of the faces here, the organizations you represent, whether it's Big Sisters, Frog Hollow, the NRT, definitely diversity. That's where I see those big changes. That's where I see the boulders being moved that really that are going to cause that change that that we need in society. That's where, and there's tangible pieces we can add, we can point to and say, look how that was done. In talking about the pandemic, it was glaring. It was shown to everybody what the gaps, what inequities exist in society, whether it's healthcare, food security, social welfare. I mean, it would just broadcast it for everybody. Well, here's what communities have been talking about for so long, but now you see it under this lens of a global pandemic. And the response to address those was led by many of the organizations here and others. It wasn't led through government. Government, and this might be controversial, needs to understand their lane. And that is empowering the groups represented here and perhaps in this chat as well. Definitely empowering Indigenous communities to be the sea change that we need. The answers are actually in community. It's not in government. And so if there is a path out of this, and there it definitely is, a little plug, hopefully it's with technology, but I really do think that the path forward is from community. It's not anywhere else. It's from community.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sapkar, for sort of sharing that so eloquently. And I just go back to Chantal, your point around really centering and asking people. I don't want to use the word clients. I have a little bit of issue with the word clients. I know that that's been sort of formalized under colonial structures to call it clients. They're people. Centering people. What is most important for you? What would you like to see? What is the change you want to see? And as Apkar has mentioned, government doesn't hold that. Our colonial structures have given them power. And I think in community, where we need to see is, again, from a very respectful place, is we need to share some of that shape or change that power dynamic. We have a little bit of savior syndrome, I call it, especially in community, because again, we're quite, we're financially dependent on government. And in many ways, I certainly can say in the social services sector per se, our past generations have been more around appeasing government to ensure that there's financial viability of organizations, as opposed to owning more of that space to say, actually, we are community, and this is what community needs. These are community needs that are also going to help solve your biggest problems that you're elected to do as well too. So I go back to the concept of allyship. We're not on the other side of the equation. We're just showing you a different perspective. Let's solve this work together. And so it's really creating that circle and sort of changing that narrative around. And I look at this not as a place, and I say this for any of our social service organizations that may have joined the call, or even the staff at DIVERSEcity, is actually owning your responsibility in the work that you're doing in community, and shifting that not to say, did we actually fulfill contract stipulation clause A, B, and C, but actually to say, did we actually represent community and what community needs? And regardless of what role you hold or position you're in, to be able to share what your perspectives are, what you're seeing from an advocacy lens, and making sure that it gets to the ears of decision makers. And it is responsibilities for leaders like us to be able to be, I would say, change our leadership role to be at minimum at least 80% as advocating and lobbying, as opposed to focusing just on growth, because I see that is actually part of your growth strategy. We cannot be we can't afford to have a mismatch of where government policies are and what community needs. That has to be entrenched in together. And it's important. I think I'm going to just really jump off of the word ally here, because there's a great comment here that one of our board members has shared in as well too, saying, wonderful discussion, folks. One of the best words I've seen through the work of Truth and Reconciliation Commission is ally. Non-Indigenous communities being an ally helps all levels of Indigenous communities. Another important word is truth. For Indigenous people, we cannot shut off our identity, so we are constantly in these discussions. discussions. So again, I hope I'm saying it properly. Very good to you all for your bravery and honesty. Thank you so very much. And again, another comment, again, probably owed to you, Upcar. The tech sector is a good place to start with some huge changes others can also adopt. So obviously, certainly we're seeing technology possibly being part and parcel of the way forward. And as others, you know, Chantal has noted as well too, is creating space, amplifying voices, hearing directly from community what they need, and centering that as the place from which we build community is critical. And you know, as Lisa has noted as well too, is that we continue to need to work in tandem together, making sure that there is that there's perspectives taken that are not just tokenistic, but actually ingrained in the work that we do in community building and creating that safe space forward together. This is not something that's done from the side of our desks. This is work that needs to be done front and center.